Hello, and welcome to What Moves Us, the podcast where we ask, what moves us? Or more accurately, what's going to move us in future?
We look at debates, themes, and decisions of the minute that will impact on the way we get about in the future.
Hello, and welcome to What Moves Us. It's been a while since the three of us has got together, so let's have a quick catch up. This podcast is going to be in two parts. One is you get to hear from us, Dev, Johanna, and Liam. And then after the break, we will welcome our newest member, who is Gregory from TreeStock, which is a really exciting interview we had earlier on. So listen through for that. So, Deb, Johanna, how are you doing?
Doing very well, thank you, Liam. I'm going to dive in first because I've only got about 5 minutes to carry on chatting to you all because we did the tree stock discussion first, and it was, I have to say, very, very interesting. We don't normally kind of have discussions that last that long, but it was an excellent podcast chat. So, but yeah, other than that, all good. How about you, Johanna?
Yeah, I'm well. Still stuck in the cold and wet north of Scotland, where summer just never seems to be arriving. But I thought the first thing you were going to talk about, Deb, was Arsenal.
Not
Well,
again. No, veto it.
I know. I'm sorry. I have been leveraging the magnificent Arsenal winning the Premier League into every single work related and non-work related engagement that I've been having. So yes, let me just lay down a marker again. Arsenal are the best team in the whole country, and we are the best at doing parades. And I was at the parade
Thanks for that.
Saturday. It was a magnificent showcase of London, uh, just
Yeah.
as a city and how good we are at doing those kind of things. And, and that's transport related because it was all kind of relatively well organized. My train was a little bit like, up and down getting back, but um, it was, yeah, it was brilliant. And
And and
London is
I was just going to say, probably in the interest of balance to our listeners, Liam and I probably don't care either way.
well, I'm taking the high ground, so that's fine. Apologies to any other football fans from any other football teams, but,
Right.
there's no escaping that Arsenal is the best team in the country at the moment, so there you go.
Okay. Thanks. Thanks for
Moving on.
that service announcement. Uh,
Uh,
we have had a
probably
very,
lost
very
that's probably lost us loads of listeners now.
yes.
Apologies.
We have had a super duper busy spring planning events for the rest of the year because this is our 10th anniversary year. Um, and we have a whole series of events, and our research paper will be coming out soon. So the research paper has been drafted and is very interesting. We will do another podcast on that in the next few weeks. And then we have obviously our 10-year anniversary series, of which the launch for that was last week. So, Johanna, tell us about our amazing event last week at the lofty heights of the BT Tower.
Oh, you took away my thunder because I was just about to say we were at the BT Tower.
Delighted.
Um, and
Say
we
it
thought
again. Where were we?
in the BT Tower.
Oh, it was amazing. I mean, I've never been to the top of the BT Tower before, and it was what a place to have an event. It was spectacular.
So,
I mean, the event was fantastic, but the venue was just,
so
yeah,
I
brilliant.
think it was a first for all of us, because BT sponsored the event, and when we approached them, I was asking for their headquarters because they have absolutely fabulous offices in the city of London, but we were very lucky to be offered the BT Tower because it is going to be closing shortly, because it is going to be turned into a hotel. So not only did we have our fantastic event there, but also we are going to be one of the last people to use it as well. So our event was a female founders event because one of our core values is that we promote diversity in rail. And diversity and innovation as well. And I thought, what a fabulous way to celebrate our 10th anniversary by highlighting some female founders who either work in rail or work in transport or who want to work in rail. So that was sort of like the ethos of my idea. And part that came back was because only from a report that came out last year, only female founders only attract 2% of all VC investment, venture capitalist investment. And I thought, what an interesting statistic, because we talk about women coming into, or females coming into rail, and I think we're about 17% now. The workforce is female. So
Mhm.
still not great, but it's even worse if you're a female founder. So I just
Without-
thought it would be useful to explore why was that,
Yeah.
and what
And-
do they have different barriers to other founders?
Without fixating on the word, I did find it interesting. You just said attract, and it's interesting that seems to put the onus on the female founders to be treated equally by funders. So would you say it's that 2% of money is
Well, I had a
Yes,
really
it's
interesting. Just for my two penny worth, because I've got to go drop off soon. It was really interesting listening to the panel, which was excellent, I thought, because I had that almost gave that question quite a different take. Because when Shamit asked the question, about moving your companies as female founders, you get your companies to a certain point and then you look for investment, or you sell on, or what have you, which is the sort of standard model for a lot of kind of tech startups. And I thought, and I mean, I don't want to, it sounds like I'm sort of stereotyping, like, or using a kind of stereotype to describe a company or a behavior that's associated with a female founder. But all of the founders that were on that panel said that they hadn't sought that, because they'd started a company and they were heavily invested in the success of the company. And so they actually wanted to carry on, they wanted to carry on building the company. They didn't want to kind of get it. They didn't want to give up any of the kind of control, because they felt personally and emotionally very invested in the company and in its success. And I thought, I mean, at the time when I was sitting in the audience, I thought, gosh, that'd be an interesting sort of PhD to do, and whether that actually is true if you kind of multiply
Yeah,
it out, I just
I
thought that was really interesting, because it completely skews on its head that question that we used
I
to promote the event.
I read that, in exactly the same way as you did, Deb, in the fact that it's just a different view on how they wanted to grow the business, because there was a lot of conversation about bootstrapping,
Yeah.
about the way, the funding approach and that. And some of the interesting thing I thought, I can't remember which of the panelists that said this, but they wanted to remain in control. So it was a conscious decision that they weren't
Yeah.
seeking money because they wanted to remain in control. And of course, when you go for investment, you're giving up control. And there was a lot of conversation as well about what you'd have to change in your business if you went for that investment, because the investor would want to take it in a different direction to your value. So I thought that was quite interesting as well. And we didn't sort of like explore that maybe enough, about what that actually means for investment and what that means for direction, for companies, because are male founders more comfortable with giving up that control and sort of and also sort of like taking their company, pivoting in a different way as opposed to female. But the other thing that I thought was interesting that came out of the panel as well was that a lot of the barriers actually had nothing to do with being female or male. It was common barriers. It didn't make any difference what sex you were. You had the same, if you were looking for funding, it was the same, you came across the same challenges. So I think there was really two good insights there that came out of the event.
Yeah, I agree. And it was a really rich, sort of insightful discussion, I thought, across the whole of the panel. Really, really good event, all around.
Tell us who was speaking.
So we had
There was our keynote was from Shamit Geiger, who is managing director of West Coast Partnership Development, which is the delivery arm of the service for HS2 and the West Coast train services. We had a presentation from Dr. Nicola Millard, who is from BT in
Principal Innovation Partner
at BT. She was great. Very, very lively presentation. Shamus was very good, and also, but quite inspiring, and also calling on female founders to come into Rome. And then she led a panel of female founders from both in transport and looking to come into transport.
So we had Holly Clark from Byway Travel, which is a company that I really admire just because I love what they do with supporting slow travel. Sarah Niskova from Fox Intelligence, which is is it talking to animals? Is that what you'd call it? But finding all
planes that talk to animals.
Yeah, like it is quite interesting and amazing. Liz Davidson from Esterix, who is the Chief Marketing Officer. Hiram Fleary from Tit Group, which promotes food and beverages into all sorts of transport groups, but particularly in cruises, rail, and aviation.
Yeah, so it's a wide selection, and also at different stages of growth. But it was very nice to bring them together, and then also have the chance for Shamit to put questions. I thought the exit question was actually really interesting in the fact that when asked, none of the founders had sort of a direct exit plan in mind, which I think is associated with the investment conversation we had earlier. Because it's sort of not all mapped out. It's a growth journey for all of these founders. And then and almost similar to the conversation that the listeners will hear in a minute about the social credit that goes into running a company. It's just the emotional energy that you put into founding a company was really reflected on from this panel.
As I said earlier, there was a lot of talk about, bootstrapping, and there was also, sort of like, and I think somebody said on the panel, it might have been Holly, that said this, was that the best type of money is the money your customers give you, because if you can continue to fulfill contracts and do it without having to ask others for funding, then that is the best type of funding.
Yes, which again, you're in control of. You're in control of the money when it comes in. But yes,
females must be just control freaks.
But yes, it was an excellent event, and then we went up to the tower for
And there was some great networking, wasn't there, with that tremendous view from the top of the tower. So I think it was a real privilege to have been able to have held our event there, and to hold such a special event, with so many diverse voices and diverse businesses. So whilst we had startups there, we had academics, we had Innovate UK, it was we had people from GBR, from the supply chain. So I think we had a really good mix of networking going on, and people wanting to share and exchange, what they were doing, in their businesses.
Yes, I think so, and hopefully some good follow-ups come from that. There is a photo gallery online, which you can see through our website.
And there are some great photos there. My favourite is though of Nicola with her thumbs up. Just mid conversation like that. I think that says everything about the event for me in some ways.
Thumbs up. Excellent. Right. After the break, we will hear from Gregory. So let's welcome Gregory Meyers to our conversation from our newest member, TreeStock.
Sure. Hi. Pleasure to be on. My name is Gregory. My company is TreeStock. We create digital twins of individual trees, so we can model those individual trees right down to the twig level, tell you every bit of information about it, its biomass, its timber volume, what species it is, what health it is, what health status it is. But critically, we can do that at scale across entire forests and create digital twins less of every tree across entire stands of forest, so that you have a full inventory of every single tree in that forest, and really allow the end users, being the forest managers, the land agents, to better understand, better manage, and better value the asset that is actually this nature. And that's what we're trying to do. I would say we're still super early stage, so we're still trying to do it, and we have a handful of early adopters that are really enthusiastic. But it is pairing up a lot of state-of-the-art AI and state-of-the-art remote sensing, so drones that have lidar, as well as earth observation, so satellite imagery, to be able to produce this product. But it's also a lot of human-centric design that we're putting through, because the end users are not people that hold GIS degrees. They're not, data scientists. They're, foresters on the ground that just want to use that information. So we try to make it as simple as possible and intuitive as possible. So it should be that if you can use Google Maps, you should be able to use our platform.
A couple of questions, is something we ask a lot of our members, I suppose, is in your sort of journey so far, what's been the biggest challenge, I suppose, for you in terms of turning what was a good idea into a viable business? And also from a rail perspective, given that the railways, have got millions of trees, natural assets all along all around the network. This feels like, something that the rail industry would be extremely interested in. And I just wondered what have you, and if not, how is that sort of interaction into rail that you would probably hope for, given that, given the kind of scope of your sort of offer, what that's been like. So I suppose two kind of questions there, if that's all right.
Yeah, absolutely. To address the first one, I mean, on to the challenges in getting to getting to making this an actual product that people want. Uh, we've built this really from the ground up, working with the end users. And when I say end users, we talk to 40 different organizations all across the board, like NGOs, government, uh, tree planting charities, to commercial forestry, carbon credit insurers, agri-tech company, etc. Anyone who had anything to do with a tree, to just really understand the space as best as we could, because one of my biggest fears is developing something that's absolutely incredibly beautiful, amazing, that doesn't actually have value to the end user, and thus doesn't get used. And it's, I was a academic, so as an ex-academic, I've done a lot of stuff that is super interesting stuff, but it goes in a paper and then doesn't get used in the real world.
Yeah.
And to create this, an actual impact, the challenge has really been for us is we see the need, but making sure we can deliver it to the way that they expect, and getting through those, as frictionless as possible, because it is a very traditional field. A lot of the ways that we manage trees, um I wouldn't even be exaggerating to say that we can do most of the surveying methods done today 500 years ago. You literally tape measuring clipboard, sample, measure the diameter of a handful of trees, and you average across, and that's. I mean, I'm being a bit flippant about it because there's a little bit more science into it, but it is. It's.
It was a lot in common with rail there, I'd say. Sorry to be flippant.
No, no, and that's what, like, I came from my background being PhD in applied AI, and working on multiple different projects of trying to put AI into practical approaches, and we won a consultancy contract with Scottish Forestry, and we're just blown away by the current state of things. I was like, we've got so much advanced tech. How are we not leveraging the best cutting edge stuff that we have to actually, I don't want to come across, environmentalists to a level, but protect our environment that we've got, that we're it's a massive, even if you're looking at it entirely in a cold calculating way, the natural assets are worth hundreds of billions of pounds to the UK economy. It would be absolutely crippling to our country, and shockwaves if we have massive ecosystem collapse.
Yeah.
I think COVID did a massive favor in terms of the shedding a light on just how green spaces affected our, before it was green spaces are nice to have. Now it's wait a sec, it's almost like a mandatory thing, that it's going through the waves of, if you don't live within 300 meters, there's some policies and stuff like within 300 meters of a green space, then that's something that actually needs to be addressed. That's a potential actual mental health problem in the community. And I'm really glad that it's being pushed this way, but it's turning that a lot of these, oh, that'd be really good and really great, into something that is that can deliver its value at cost, because at the end of the day, they have to buy it. Even if we were doing it at cost, they still need to see the value in it, in adopting our solutions.
Yeah, and I guess for you, it's about making that case for sort of efficiency as well, because I would imagine that a lot of your capabilities could offer, those kind of efficiencies. I come from a local government background, so I'm thinking about all of the efficiency. Oh, I remember when I was back in local government, let's chop all the trees down so we don't have to maintain them, and all of those arguments, like it's everything is about sort of like if being efficient, productive, whatever, which I guess everything that you're doing sort of plays into.
Yeah, it's been actually quite a exciting journey, showing a lot of the kind of, you know, local authorities, tree officers and commercial forestry, like putting some of this stuff in front of them.
Yeah.
It's just so, you know, quantum leap next. I don't like to say next gen because it's such a buzzword, but next gen compared to what they have been using, that initially they think, oh, it's great. And then you see kind of like the spark go off of, oh, wait, and we could do this, and we could do this, and we could easily do this. If we have a catalog of every single tree, we can, and able to share that information freely, it can be used in this area, this, etc. And showing just all the efficiency gains, and time saving, that and justification of resources, of why, even if we do say have to knock down, clear fell a set of trees for whatever development, but then that's been accurately measured and accounted for, so that we're correctly offsetting that, instead of just sort of, oh, we'll get around to it if later down, we totally promise, and then no one's keeping track of that. So yeah, there's a lot, that, and I guess that ties in maybe into the second part of your question. There is the sort of the applicability to the rail industry. Is We see it as like you mentioned, the rail industry has so many trees because of all the massive benefits that putting trees alongside your rail lines actually has, let alone all the benefits it has to stop subsidence of the ground, it protects sound, protects sound and the neighboring, etc. But because of all those tons and tons of benefits, we have so much, just spans and spans of trees. And the threat is, obviously, as we're getting more and more severe climate change, we're getting more and more storms that are getting more and more stronger weather. We're getting the consequences is trees are falling down. If we don't look after it, manage it, then we're gonna have, of course, we're gonna have problems. So
Yeah. And understand it, I guess. I mean, I think I remember when I was at I was at university 25 years ago, as an older graduate, obviously. And I remember that the railway kind of the rail the next to the railway ecosystem is a kind of is an ecosystem in itself, because it's sort of it's quite unique, 'cause it's kind of untouched, because it's obviously, people are kept away from it and all of that. So that's really interesting, isn't it, in itself? And also, you just made me think that, on projects like HS2, I remember back in the early days when they were doing the early civils work, enabling works for the sort of engineering bit that came next.
Mm.
And there was a lot of hoo-ha about trees being cut down and all of that from the environmental organizations and all of that. But they had a real sort of issue with kind of communicating the fact that actually they couldn't replant in those areas with the same trees that were there, because those trees were just not viable in terms of the climate, our climate. So, just bunging back a load of oak trees, for example, in that area, was just not going to be, wasn't going to work, because they wouldn't survive.
We talked about the environment and the benefit and that, but one of the things that always comes up in any infrastructure scheme, regardless of whether it's rail, and I'm conscious of sitting up here in Highland, Scotland, surrounded by trees, and they're taking apart they're they're taking apart the landscape at the moment to dual carriage the A9, which has been a very controversial project in Scotland for you, because if you're an environmentalist, you don't want it, but if you're stuck behind a caravan at the height of summer, then you want it. And of course, and all the accidents and that are caused by drivers' frustration as a result. And I wondered, how does your product help tell that story of these trees need to be cut down, because you need to manage trees. And I think that's probably some of the things that are failed, people fail to understand, that regardless of how you do it, you're felling trees all the time, whether it's for the environment, or whether it's for clearance, or whether it's for an infrastructure. So how does your product tell that story, and then guide almost how to rebuild a landscape once the project is finished, and what the best way to do it is?
Yeah, it's an interesting, dilemma, and this is something that I think does get, I wouldn't say misunderstood, but we are growing trees and then cutting down trees, even from just a pure commercial forestry perspective, is a good thing for our environment. Like wood captures a lot of carbon, and the more we grow of that wood and cut it down and plant new forests, as long as we are replanting and capturing more of that carbon and using more wooden goods, it is better for our environment. And we are a species that want to solve a lot of our own problems, and urban sprawl is going to happen. It's inevitable. It really is sort of, as you're saying, it's how do we accurately then go, well, we're going to do this. How do we offset it or directly? I mean, not every, no, I'm not going to go across the board and say everything is worth cutting down on that front. But when we are cutting down, that's making sure that we accurately know what we have cut down, so that we can actually offset it or adjust for it. And often we just simply aren't measuring things, and what we don't measure, we don't manage. It's simple as that. You can chop down a long length of however much, and it will be that, it'll be however much, and it'll be forgotten. But when you start measuring it and you say, oh, wait a sec, actually this was this much embedded carbon, it was this much biodiversity that we've actually lost as a result of this. How are we actually going to offset that and keep that sort of, I want to say accountability, but it is just saying a better understanding that what you've actually done or you intend to do. So when we go in and we create these digital twins of individual trees, because we capture really high fidelity information of their species, of their health, of their breakdown, it's a much more holistic picture in what's actually there, as well as it is digitized in our system. I mean, I don't want to, we're using a lot of very fancy cutting edge technology to, at the end of the day, produce a very simple list of just what trees are where and what state they're in. And that's because that information is very difficult to actually produce. I mean, it's fine, you can go up to an individual tree and measure it by hand and log its species, geotag it, and that'll take you maybe a couple of minutes if you've got the right tools and you're used to it. But times that by 1 million trees, times that by 100 million trees, it's just simply infeasible. So that's why we are using remote sensing to digitally log and track the actual natural capital that we have, so that if a management decision or a construction development decision is that actually we do need to put a road here, a rail here, well, okay, that may be fine and may be justifiable, and the benefits are there, but let's make sure we've now know what we've done with that and how we've offset that.
Could I ask, the commercial model for this is,
Mm.
do you have to sell the benefit of, are you still in the zone of sort of selling the benefit of what you do, or are you in the zone of selling your company as the provider of this?
It is very much selling the benefit. We've done a lot of extensive commercial competitive analysis, and there is no one else offering what we're offering. They don't even sometimes have the facilities to look at our data. That was originally we thought, oh, we'd just be able to pump out, we'd have no UX platform. We would just be a data layer because we're sure everyone here will have a GIS department or team or just the application or so, and we'll just be able to feed this stuff out to them. And unanimously across the board, everyone was like, no, 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 we want you to have a platform because we don't handle it. And even if we do have some systems in place, it's in no state that anyone outside of our one GIS person would remotely understand. Um, so that was why we really kind of got our focus of, okay, we need to address this issue of making a real user-centric design simple, understandable, and reinvent a lot of established processes, because there are ways that things are being currently measured and ways that things that are currently being reported, and they're reported in those ways because they don't have the full extent of the data. They assume that it's sampled, and because they assume it's sampled, to try to keep some level of uniformity across everyone that's sampling it, they have certain methodologies that seem really weird and sort of twisted in how they're done, but it's to try to make some level of uniformity because they don't simply just have the actual data. And now that we're providing them with the actual data, we're having to make some of our own metrics just to actually say, how much is your timber growing by? And the metrics are all established around these sample ways of doing things, and we're like, no, no, this is the actual growth, etc., end to end. There's no guessing, no averaging. It's that is it. So it's almost retraining a I don't want to say retraining because it's they know the industry more than us, but it's retraining from a digital perspective of what the industry should be measuring and using.
I love that idea of a new metric of how much trees are going by, and it's kind of relevant to something that I'm quite interested in because we mentioned about the number of trees that are falling down onto the network and how much that cost to railway. And I was interested in sort of like how many trees there are along the routes of railway and how quickly your system could build a digital twin of all of those trees. And does your product then assess when a tree could possibly fall down due to a weather incident? Is it as advanced to be able to do that?
Yeah. So we're able to do our real maybe in a sense of our vision. It's not a vision statement, but one of our like key goals of really what we want to achieve is by 2030 we want to be able to map every tree on the planet. That's our sort of end, like that's our earth shot idea of let's be able to map every tree on the planet. That's our goal. If we can't get bigger than that, if there were trees on other planets, then maybe, but so far we don't. So that's where we're trying to aim things at, and we think we can do that through the massive advances that have taken place in Earth observation technology, satellite imagery, but it's getting better and better every day. The cost of launching satellites into space is a fraction of what it was even 5 years ago, and the technology is just leaps and bounds better than what it was. So as that gets better, we're able to not only map things in high resolution, but in spectral bands that we previously haven't had the ability to do so. We get more information. And when we get that information from Earth observation, we can do the entire country and we can do the entire planet. We'd be able to remap every single tree and see its growth at a weekly basis.
That's amazing.
Does that mean you can do the whole the UK railway by Christmas then? So that was kind of hit in my head. But
Yeah, I mean that is to degree. I mean, it does come down to a little bit of what metrics are relevant and the accuracy relevant to the end user when we're doing things like wind blow risk. And it's fine if we're doing wind blow risk in, you know, a highland forest. We can do that through Earth observation and because we don't need to be super accurate on the metrics. But when it's wind blow risk for trees that are right next to a, you know, a power line or a rail line, we would tend to we're at this certainly at this stage, we're wanting to be a lot more cautious and accurate, and fully map that tree, and then put it through our kind of wind blow models to say, you know, if a gust of this speed comes through, what actual trees in this area would be affected, and where would then they thus fall? Are they within reach of a critical infrastructure and all that sort of stuff?
Are you working with rail at the moment?
No, and that's sort of the you know, one of the big things of why I wanted to join the rail innovation group is precisely to we see it as a little bit of a uh it's almost like a, you know, you have to be in sort of a club a little bit. And
Solving.
yeah. And I have friends that work in network rail, and I even approached them of saying, you know, how can we get some of the stuff just in front of people that would see if this is interesting? And they were like, we have no clue. We've spoken to a handful of just more generalist advisors, and they had no clue. And this sort of, we think we've got something, we just want to get it in front of someone who knows the industry well and say, can we create value for you? Because we think we can, but it's just even getting that connection, that to have that call is a lot more difficult than I originally thought it was.
You're in the right place, Gregory. That's all we can say. You're in the right place. Thank you, Gregory, for, you know, giving us such a brilliant insight into what you do.
Thanks for listening to another episode of What Moves Us. We hope we moved you. For more episodes, you'll definitely want to subscribe to our channel.